Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to yet another History of Tekken video. Today, talking about a very special episode that I'm thrilled to talk about, as it is discussing my favourite character in the series. I mean, look at how cool he looks! And that is the shadowy steel-clad luchador of the series, Armor King, a man of very few words and the mentor to King. And of course, with his reveal and inevitable arrival during this fall, I could not think of a better time and opportunity to unmask the lore of this character, to understand his background, his rivalries, and what exactly makes him so different from his fellow Jaguar masked luchador, from bathroom brawls to the king of the Iron Fist tournament. Today, we will be breaking that all down. And just to preface and say, I will strictly only be focusing on the mainline continuity of games. So no Tekken Tag 1 and Tag 2 unfortunately. So with that said, let's mask up and delve into the elusive shadowy background of Armor King. Now prior to the events of the 1994 game, the background of Armor King is that of a mystery. We don't know what country he hails from, only that he resides in Mexico and studies in the art of pro wrestling. More specifically, shoot strong style wrestling. But he wasn't the only one to train in this. You see, Armor King is more of a mantle held by two brothers, instead of that of a singular title. Whilst the identities and names are completely unknown, we do know that the two tag team together. As to how much success they had in ring is completely unknown, but at some point in time, the two would inevitably part ways, with the details yet to be revealed. So it's unknown if this was a mutual parting or breakup on the foundation of bitterness. Either way, this takes us onto the first Armor King of the series, a legendary wrestler in South America dubbed as the Wicked Flower. And looking to hone his skills globally, he would travel to dojos across the world challenging their best fighters, knocking many of them out or forcing them to submit. In fact, such travels at one point would pit him against the likes of Paul Phoenix, with the outcome of that fight still currently unknown to this day. As Armor King continued to travel the globe, this inevitably puts him in the crosshairs of a fellow Jaguar masked wrestler, King, and the two brewed quite a fierce rivalry between them, having clashed multiple times across the globe in order to prove who was the better wrestler. This rivalry was only further exacerbated during one of their bouts where Armor King's eye was injured, which explains why Armor King does have the red eye, although it doesn't really make sense for his brother, but that doesn't matter. In his somewhat defeat, Armor King's resentment towards King began to brew, as the luchador did find a lot of success, which now actually takes us up to the events of the first Tekken game. With the announcement of the King of Iron Fist tournament held by Heihachi Mishima, Armor King came to learn of King's participation in it, knowing that he would use the funds from the tournament in order to raise an orphanage. So in a very heelish manner, Armor King saw this as an opportunity to even the score, proceeding to enter the tournament and get deep enough into it where the two would have another match, with Armor King once again coming up short. But unlike before where Armor King stewed in bitterness, the two actually bonded through this experience, having become friends by burying the hatchet and becoming sparring partners with one another. They were like brothers with their rivalry forged in the ring. Even whilst King was not successful in winning the tournament, having come third, the funds from this would be just enough to create an orphanage, with Armor King by his side, helping to support him both in ring and out of it. Now coming into the events of the second game, where a few years had passed, King's orphanage was a large success, having done wonders for kids left on the streets. But tragically, one day under King's care, an orphan would die in his arms. With his conviction shattered, it caused him to spiral into a pit of despair. So much so that he relied on alcohol to drown his pain, and this was really taking a toll on him, causing him to become erratic and sloppy. Having seen what his friend had become, and knowing that this wasn't the idol that the orphans looked up to, Armor King would find the Drunken King in a darkened alley and offer to help him through strength. With the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 2 around the corner, he saw that two opportunities presented itself, that he could help and save his friend, and to even the odds from their previous match in the last tournament. So going into the second tournament, the two underwent a brutal training regimen that not only reignited King's fighting spirits by getting him back into shape, but had the two more than prepared for the second King of Iron Fist tournament. So the two would enter the tournament once again, hoping to cross paths once more to settle the score. But it's unknown how far either of them actually advanced in the tournament. We only know that both were unsuccessful, but in its aftermath, King would walk away a better man, with the orphans once again seeing him for the hero he was. But for Armor King, this is where things actually take quite a sad turn, because at the end of Tekken 2, it is revealed around this time that he's suffering from an unknown heart condition, something that would cause him to cough up blood and blur his vision. Whilst not named nor revealed in universe, these are signs of heart failure, something that Armor King more than likely knew of, but refused to do anything about, not going out until the final bell rung. So this would now take us up into the events of Tekken 3, where 16 years would pass from the prior tournament, and the devastation that would strike during this game was unlike that of any other, as during this time period, the Mishima Zaibotsu had unraveled what would be dubbed as the god of fighting, Ogre, an Aztec stoic figure who would travel the world, challenging some of the world's best fighters and killing them when he was victorious. Whilst Armor King wasn't in his crosshairs, King most certainly was, having to have been one of the first to fall to his hand. And during this time period, Armor King was not doing much better. The heart failure had taken its toll, and the pain he felt from his friend's death broke his heart, as he only learned of King's demise once the orphanage struggled with payments. Yet instead of wallowing in his sorrow, Armor King proceeded to channel his grief into purpose. Having learned that one of the orphans King had raised had donned the mantle in the hopes of keeping the orphanage afloat, he naturally felt obliged to help him, because he was terrible. So wanting to honor his friend's memory and legacy, Armor King would pour his soul and teachings into this new king, passing on not only King's teachings, but that of his own, showing him what it takes to be a true luchador. So with a new king crown, the two would turn their gaze towards the third King of Iron Fist tournament, with not only vengeance in the mind of the second king, but to take that prize money and sustain the orphanage once again, honoring the wishes of both of his mentors. But much like prior tournaments, the outcome of who fought who and who beat who is ultimately unknown. We're only aware that King did walk away empty-handed. Despite their failures though, they would actually find some success, with King having gone on to win a world title, and presumably win enough money to sustain the orphanage. But it's here where Armor King starts to hear the ring of the final bell, being absent during the title victory, and having sat in the locker room to take the weight off his feet, where he reveals his critical state to King. Now coming into the events of Tekken 4, a lot would go down, because just prior to the events of the game itself, where Armor King was traveling the globe despite his critical state, he wound up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, having sat down at an Arizona bar and crossed paths with Craig Marduk, a Valtudo fighter with a laundry list of violence and crimes. The disrespect that Marduk had for Armor King led to the two coming to blows, with Armor King blindsided and glassed in his weakened state, then being killed by Marduk, a fate that he was ultimately doomed to, crippled by both his health and Marduk. So I hear you pose the question of, how does he return? Well, despite being completely absent during the events of the fourth game, he does resurface in the fifth tournament, with of course his brother under the mantle. But during this time period, the tag team was not well documented, and the second king had absolutely no knowledge about him. So seeking to avenge his brother's killer, Armor King would enter the fifth tournament, with the hopes of hunting down and brutally killing Marduk in the same fashion he had murdered his brother with. Although he could not fulfill his goals during this time period, he would cross paths with the likes of King, who naturally felt like he had seen a ghost. And when he tried to confront him, he would be gut-kicked and put into a pile driver, leaving him dazed and confused as to what happened. So naturally, this does raise the question why Armor King would attack his own brother's pupil. Well, that's actually because the second Armor King holds King in quite high disdain. Whilst it definitely doesn't tether on hate like Marduk, he really does not respect King. Because whilst King descended down a path of vengeance in the fourth tournament, during the fifth, King and Marduk would settle their beef and actually become allies, despite the fact that Marduk even donned Armor King's mask as a way to disrespect him. In fact, it may have been this catalyst alone that made the second Armor King enter the tournament. Now coming into the events of Tekken 6, Not long after King and Marduk made peace, he would be attacked by Armor King in his dressing room, shocking Marduk, who was naturally offset from this confrontation. How could a dead man be walking? And that is the impression that this Armor King wanted to leave him with. A scarred memory of the past, actively choosing to haunt him before killing him. So naturally, with such questions raised and needing answers, King and Marduk would do some investigating of their own, with King being able to deduce his identity by finding a hidden photo, and Marduk, well, this is not exactly a man of class, so he looked for a more direct approach and answer, finding Armor King's grave, digging it up, and then of course, seeing his dead body. And it's here where he is confronted by Armor King once again, but this time with King himself, who is finally able to provide answers. But the somewhat break of immersion and kayfabe here does not shatter this Armor King's convictions, telling Marduk that he could never forgive him for killing his brother, which then proceeds to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 6, where the two would encounter each other, and the two fought in a bloody battle. One that put both in the hospital, as they were rendered in bloody unconscious states. Caught between a rock and a hard place, King would act as a mediator between his friend and his mentor's brother. Knowing that this blood feud would never end between the two until someone was dead, he would offer them an ultimatum. One last and final match between the two, where if Marduk lost, he would retire from fighting for good. But if Armor King failed in his path of vengeance, he would be forced to remove his mask. A true sign of defeat in Lucha Libre, so the stakes could not have been higher between the two, with such a match scheduled to occur during the 7th King of Iron Fist tournament. However, despite his agreement to the stipulation, it does seem like the match never quite came to be, with his Tekken 8 profile saying the following: Armor King, a heel wrestler, participated in the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 7 to settle the score with the nemesis who killed his brother. However, before this fatal showdown could take place, the organizer went missing, forcing the tournament to be cancelled. Since then, the world has come under the control of G Corporation, and the two men would never have a chance to face off, leaving them to frustrate each other. One day King, the undisputed champion of the professional wrestling world, appears before Armor King, having previously been consumed by a desire for revenge by having overcome that conflict. King attempts to stop Armor King somehow. However, King's pleas are not heard by Armor King. Don't talk like that. I have no intention of giving up my revenge. If that's the case, then beat me in the ring. King challenges Armor King with unusual force, risking his own life to stop his revenge. Armor King doesn't hate King, but he must eliminate the obstacles standing in his way. Very well, I will use any means necessary to defeat you, the champion, and remain true to myself. That is my way of evil. In order to bring King to the mat, Armor King decides to unleash the illegal techniques that his brother once taught him, but that he had made taboo. Secretly, he harbors in his heart a desire for revenge against his nemesis, knowing that victory lies ahead. So this is a really interesting path and direction that Armor King's going down. So despite the build-up that was there in 7, it does look like the death of Heihachi really sent a ripple through the universe, completely unraveling the thread of the evil flower. Thus, with the match off, it does seem like King is the only person capable of standing in his way that halts a death match between him and Marduk. As for how the match unravels between these two, that is unfortunately a story yet to be revealed, or something that may be capitalized and concluded in the following installment. So with that said and everything covered here, that has been it for the history of Armor King. From the early years when he was known as the Evil Flower, to that of the vengeful, bloodthirsty Armor King we now have today. This character has undergone quite a big path and journey throughout Tekken's history, with so many ups and downs throughout the saga. And for me personally, it's just so great to see him return, as his running storyline alongside King and Marduk is my favourite in all of Tekken lore, even surpassing that of the Mishima saga. Yeah, don't at me, but I just absolutely love everything this character represents. From the hard, aggressive shoot style of wrestling that he utilizes, to like the insane costumes he has from game to game. How could I not fall in love with that character design? I greatly appreciate another grappler being put in game that uses a different style of wrestling outside of the more technical grapples that King does have. My one hope and worry though, is that this isn't all just like a TV wrestling storyline thing in universe. As cool and fourth wall breaking as that might be. But there's so much hanging on this storyline, and I absolutely love how it's been handled from game to game. So with that said, and the reveal of Armor King finally here, tell me, what are your thoughts on him as well as his new design? Will you be playing him on release? And what do you think of that insane fucking rage art? But until the next one everyone, that has largely been it for me. I know I don't normally tackle Tekken here on the channel, I'd only really do so when it comes to characters I'm actually quite excited to talk about. So the second I knew that Armor King was on the horizon, I absolutely had to talk about him. So I will say, if you are interested, please do leave this video a thumbs up and a comment down below, as it's actually the best way of supporting this channel. And by leaving a comment down below, it also lets me know who you guys would like to hear me talk about next. But until the next one everyone, that's been it for me. So as always, take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.